Ok. Tchau. Senhoras e senhores, bom dia. Sejam todos bem-vindas e bem-vindos à primeira mesa de conferência do 16º Simpósio Nacional da Associação Brasileira de Pesquisadores em Cibercultura de 2023, com o tema de Artes, Tecnologias Digitais, Alteridade e Diversidade. Este evento é promovido pela Associação Brasileira de Pesquisadores em Cibercultura e pela Universidade Federal de Santa Maria, através dos programas de pós-graduação de Artes Visuais, Letras e de Comunicação, e conta com o apoio do Centro de Artes e Letras, CAPES, FAPERGS e Unify. Todos estão convidados a colocarem seus telefones celulares em modo silencioso ou avião, para o melhor proveito desta solenidade. Para esta primeira conferência, contamos com a mediação do professor Dr. Felix Rebolledo Palazuelos, do Laboratório Interdisciplinar Interativo da UFSM. Compõem a mesa professora doutora René Smith, da Universidade de Witwatersrand, doutoranda Yaniya Mikhalina, da Academia de Artes de Trondheim, presente de forma online, a professora doutora Flavia Meireles, do Centro Federal de Educação Tecnológica do Rio de Janeiro, de maneira online, e o professor doutor Christoph Brunner, da Universidade de Erasmus, presente também de maneira online. Os componentes da mesa oficial terão tempo de discurso controlado pelo mediador. E agora, passamos a palavra para o mediador desta mesa, que explanará o tema e subtemas que tangenciam o tópico atual e concretizará a abertura desta discussão. Com a palavra, o professor doutor Felix Rebolledo Palazuelos.
Bom dia a todos, todas. A apresentação vai ser em inglês esta manhã, mas se vocês tivessem perguntas ou insights que vocês querem apresentar depois das apresentações, vocês podem fazer em português. Eu vou traduzir para os palestrantes. Ok? Vamos fazer as palestras. Vamos começar com as palestras e depois que todos tenham apresentado, vamos fazer uma sessão de perguntas e respostas e uma conversa. Assim que vou começar e vamos fazer em inglês. Espero que vocês possam ler aqui as legendas. Ok? Sabemos que as legendas não são o mais perfeito no universo, mas espero que ajudem vocês para poder seguir se vocês não são fluentes em inglês. Ok? So hello everyone, welcome to our open table discussion on arts, digital technologies, otherness and diversity. We are honored to have a distinguished panel of speakers for this insightful conversation. Dr. René Smith, head of the Wits School of Arts at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. Dr. Flavia Meireles, an artist, researcher and professor from the Federal Center for Technological Education of Rio de Janeiro. Dr. Christoph Brunner, a professor at Erasmus University Rotterdam, and Yaniya Mikhalina, who's a Tartar artist and PhD candidate from Trondheim Art Academy in Norway. Together, they bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to explore the intersections of arts, digital technologies, otherness, and diversity. This promises to be a thought-provoking session that delves into the practical and pragmatic relationship between these elements. My name is Felix Rebolledo. I'll be moderating today's presentation, and together we wish to invite you, our audience, both here and online, to engage in the interchange by sharing your insights and posing questions to our esteemed speakers after the presentations. Para as pessoas que estão assistindo online, vocês podem mandar suas perguntas através do chat no YouTube. E alguém aqui no Congresso vai recolher as perguntas, vai passar para mim, eu vou traduzir e vou passar as perguntas. Ok? Então, gostaríamos que vocês tivessem coisas que comentar e que tenham perguntas depois da fala. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to a stimulating and enriching conversation. Our first speakers will be Dr. Flavia Meireles, an artist, researcher, and professor from the Federal Center for Technological Education of Rio de Janeiro, and Dr. Christoph Brunner, who is a professor at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Flavia is a dance professor and professor at the Graduate Program of Ethical Racial Relations. She holds a PhD in Communication and Culture from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She has pursued postdoctoral studies at the University of Sao Paulo in conjunction with Köln University in Germany. Christoph Brunner has an interdisciplinary PhD in the humanities from Concordia University in Montreal, where he researched ecologies of relation. Christoph's research concerns the relation between contemporary digital cultures and processes of sense-making through network media technologies. Dr. Meireles and Dr. Brunner will be speaking about infrastructures of feeling, a struggle for decolonization in transcultural digital teaching environments. In this presentation, they will engage with experiences and materials emerging from a co-taught graduate seminar between Rio de Janeiro and Lüneburg, Germany. They draw on the technological, linguistic, and organizational challenges of facilitating a safer space for study across oceans and territories. So Flavia, Christoph, welcome. Marcelo, hold on one second. Flavia, we don't have audio here from them. Their microphones are not switched on here. Alexandra? Hold on, Flavia. Hold on.
Ah, okay.
Okay, Flavia.
That is also not working.
Who's not working?
The share, I don't see anymore the app to share the screen that I saw before.
My God.
Just a second.
Oh, good. Yaniya is here. You guys are here. You're, Christoph, I think you were.
Yes.
You see that?
Yes.
You can hear me?
It's not on the presentation mode. I mean, it's the presentation mode for you.
Okay.
These are our notes.
Just a second.
Okay.
Now?
Yes, it works. Fiat looks.
The full screen?
Yes, full screen. Perfect.
Okay. Sorry
Great.
for that.
No worries. Technology is alive. So thank you very much for the invitation for this wonderful Congress. We apologize for not being in person, but fortunately, digital technology can make us together now. Yeah, me and Christoph, thank you very much, Felix, for your introduction of the panel as well. Christopher and I are working now for 6 years together. Maybe, Christoph, you want to say some words about you first?
Oh, well, yeah, maybe just as a context, Felix introduced me as part of the Erasmus University Philosophy Department, which is true, which is a recent transition, and most of the work that Flavia will outline in this slide actually is based on me being a professor at Leuphana University in Germany. And it's in that context that we talk about, but of course our relation and our friendship exceeds that moment up until now. So just that you don't get confused why Leuphana University comes up. It was my old place of work.
Yeah, and I'm an artist and researcher, and we met together, Christoph and I highlight in the first slide you can see on screen some moments of ongoing collaboration for now 6 years. We met in Hamburg and quite sometimes in Germany context, but also in Montreal. We are planning Christoph coming to Rio soon, but in different moments and contexts. And we always say it's an excuse for us to collaborate in person. And our online friendship and work has been running since 6 years now. I mentioned this temporal aspect because it will be an important aspect and axis of this talk today. The kinds of timing that and temporalities that we can develop or not with digital interaction and this challenge of working across territories, across oceans and territory. Okay.
Good. So what we're actually going to talk about today, or the background from which we are going to talk about, is a seminar that we co-taught this year in Lüneburg and in Rio that was called Lost in Translation, Undoing Methods for Research Between Art, Activism, and Territories. And that seminar was a master's seminar which emerged from a request at Lüneburg University from our colleague Anna Sanderman in the context of a digital education project that was, as you can see here on the screen, digital teaching and learning formats for internationalizing the master's, complementary studies, and doctoral courses. So it was actually an to kind of create inventive models of how to do digital teaching formats. And we proposed, and that's how Flavia and I started thinking about this, we proposed a format of how can we teach in a hybrid situation across the Atlantic between Rio de Janeiro and Lüneburg, Germany, tying in all these kind of hiccups that will come along the way. And that's why we call the seminar Lost in Translation. And it's kind of important to say that there was a lot of structural elements that were supported from Leuphana University. For instance, creative ways of examining students, like an e-portfolio that is more based on documenting what has happened in the class rather than a final assignment. But also it included a lot of bureaucratic layers, such as paying external speakers, legislation between the schools, actually also leading to more formalized contractual work that is actually part of the whole process. So just to mention that.
And just to give you an idea, the seminar consisted in 3 parts. I started the course with the Rio students here in person, and we had some sessions in the community Aldeia Maracanã here, working with indigenous people. We had, if you see in the slide, we have this time frame, so a Brazilian part, and then a virtual exchange which consisted of 4 sessions online. We thought that this was the limit to have quality knowledge production with technology and hybrid formats. So if you can picture, we had a room in my institution with the students in person and me in person, and we were connected to Christoph and his students and our students in Lüneburg. So with 2 cameras, and infrastructure now shows itself. I mean, me using my personal computer with no speaker, doing translation, and in Germany, 2 cameras, very excellent sounding, and people, skilled in talking more than one language, which wasn't the case for my students here in Rio. So we had these to deal with these challenges, but we thought that these challenges were giving us the opportunity to really deepen into inequalities and also addressing asymmetries between North and Global South, which were not avoided. They were part of the course. They were embraced and addressed, as you will see further. So we did this, so part in Brazil, part a seminar, a hybrid seminar, and part me coming to Lunenburg to meet the students in person by the end, in the beginning of June, so we could juxtapose different calendars from different countries, from different legislatures, so very challenging situation around time and space, but it gave us a lot of opportunity to reflect on infrastructures and even to think of what supports us as infrastructure. Is it really technology, or is there something else that makes knowledge production to have quality? We didn't have funding for professional translation support, neither in person nor through AI. We had some transcription that Zoom did, but actually this was work that was overloaded into my back and into the students' back who were bilingual. So this is important also to say. And we made all these conditions transparent so it could foster a collaborative process of taking time, really, reducing expectations on being fast or content producing, but really drawing attention to language and time and to this idea of being lost in translation.
Good. Before actually we walk you through the concept of the seminar and some of the kind of outcomes that we produced throughout this, we insert a quick reflection mode that we want to use to push what we have done and reflect on it further, and that concerns the question of time and temporality. So we actually see like 4 intersecting temporalities as being part of this hybrid teaching situation between synchronizing 2 places, 2 temporalities, 2 time zones, but also then the asynchronous aspects of time. So I will just quickly give an insight on that. So the general condition was different spaces and the promise of a common time, actually complicating our conception of time space or space time and the locality of and the conditions of the localities. So actually we dealt with chronos as the very measure or coordinate and to coordinate and sync different time zones and planning our respective in-house meetings in Rio and Lüneburg. But also it means that we had to deal with lags and delays in the time of digital transmission, the disruption of smoothness of audio vision, for instance, of the internet being too weak, actually. So as you will see later, the notion of chronos also comes up in a historical sense of referencing certain periods and historical figures and events, such as the transatlantic slave trade, the history of feminist art, or changes of mapping and naming a territory, but also the time of computing. And of course we can ask if digital temporality is chronological temporality, which I would say no, but this is another topic. So Ion. Ion is the time without measure, an expensive and cosmic time that does not abide by a linear procession of past, present, future. It is the empty time through which chance passes. And one could say it is cosmic time or the time of the gods. And Deleuze, quoting Nietzsche, Gilles Deleuze, a French philosopher, quoting Nietzsche from Zarathustra, calls Ion the dance floor for divine charges. I really like that. So in the context of the seminar, Ion was the surround of our memories of collective and trans-territorial, digital and personal memories and conceptions of time beyond the chronological succession of time, informing the process of documenting that was part and parcel of our practice and the final assignment. And we will show that in a second. And then there's kairos. Kairos is in ancient Greek, means the right, critical, or opportune moment. So the just right time. And according to Italian philosopher Antonio Negri, kairos is the absolute indeterminate time that we live and that we define by living. And that underlines the eventful construction or co-composition of each moment. So I think our collaboration across territories can be seen as a quest for kairos, for activating the power of collaborating, folded into media technological and physical infrastructures, supporting our desires to work together while being lost in translation, which we really were. So finally, the ancestral time that came in through readings such as Ailton Krenak or Bruce Albert with David Kopenawa, but also the visit of Se Urutau from Aldea Maracana that Flavia will talk about in a second. And there we engage with non-Western conceptions of time, including humans and non-humans, attending to different cycles of temporality, exceeding the individual time span and encompassing spirituality, the virtual presence or the ancestors and their potential activations in the present. And now we will walk you through the seminar.
So I will briefly read our seminar description of what we addressed. Christoph already mentioned some of the topics, but it's important to pass through it. So the seminar has taken on the challenging question of conducting transdisciplinary research between artistic and activist practices in translocal contexts. It asked about concrete ways of doing such research while accounting for different perspectives, experiences, languages, cultures, and ways of thinking. Put differently, the seminar asked how to make sense of encounters, materials, and situations that exceeds our habits of understanding, academic habits of understanding. While the title Lost in Translation, the seminar has embraced the challenge of making sense across domains of thought and practices in different territories. In a hands-on manner, the seminar has critically engaged the role of methods for enabling but also inhabiting collaborative practices.
So actually it was a combining of hybrid and local encounters in Lüneburg and Rio with artists, indigenous intellectuals and scholars in the field of philosophy, media and culture. And the seminar critically asked how to undo methods. And maybe just a kind of parentheses, the module that the seminar was taking place was a module on methods. And we thought, actually, we don't need more methods, but we actually have to figure out if we want to think transdisciplinarity and if we want to think outside of a certain kind of Western framework of how to actually undo methods. And that was like a question that we encountered through philosophical, media and cultural practices and artistic practices in particular as the core material of what we have been teaching and engaging with.
And it's important to say that we had this, from the European Enlightenment angle, methods, now talking about methods, they exist as a way of gaining knowledge of the other. And as the panel is about otherness, it's very timely that we can speak about that. Using that knowledge for concrete purposes such as political decision-making, discursive invention, preservation, or critique.
So the first part of this slide you actually heard already, but I reiterate because it's a lot we present and it's online. So we wanted to explore ways of undoing methods at the conjuncture of artistic activists and indigenous intellectual practices and across different geopolitical territories. And the second part is really crucial here, that we aimed to see what happens if we do not refrain from getting lost and what kinds of techniques and strategies are needed in the face of not understanding, that is, of being lost in translation. So we really took this kind of almost anti-pedagogical mode of pedagogy of saying, well, we actually don't want to necessarily only provide information or teach you, but we want to get together lost in translation and see what happens then.
Yeah. And it's important to mention that we were using Colorboard as a wide infinite board that mediated all these different spaces, so we can put different materials on it, image, text, moving images, and Zoom as a platform, and My Study, which was the platform, the digital teaching platform of Lofana as official tools. Okay, 3 minutes. And as in Brazil, WhatsApp is really used, so used for smaller groups, contacts through WhatsApp. Maybe we can jump to the images, Christoph.
Yes.
Just for you to have some images of it, of the Colorboard and of our collaboration, because we had this first learning process. Yeah, go ahead, Christoph.
Yes. So just to give you an idea, we worked together with the students across these two territories in an infinite whiteboard scenario where every one of us was an editor, which Flavia and I used for teaching purposes, like for instance here, a session on Ruth Wilson Gilmore's concept of infrastructure of feeling, where things are kind of outlined for teaching, but then also in other constellations, as you can see in the wider assemblage of just throwing material on there that consists also of student assignments and short writings, short responses to questions that we ask, but also the students themselves adding materials. So it became like this kind of prolific scenario of adding different times, different materialities, different purposes, all on one plane.
Yeah, and we had this invited guest to the Tal Guajajara from Aldeia Maracanã, which is the most ethnic indigenous community in urban context in Rio. And we addressed, as Christoph mentioned, indigenous knowledge, and it was very touching and important to have him in person as a guest teacher on our class. And we had in the Brazilian part also gone to the territory, so it's all about crossing territories in person and digitally. And we had a very touching session with him and Lunenburg students, which was really, we didn't expect that to be so touching. And it was very important for us also to address, can you pass the, address some feelings. And we asked as final assignment that the students from Lunenburg, because the real part was done, a final Colorboard work. And so they worked on smaller groups and made it a circle, using the indigenous community circularity and bringing it into image, and also putting some clues how to navigate this Colorboard. So what you see is really them processing the exchanges we had. Can you pass on? And you can jump this one just to show their material reworked. So the kind of undoing methods was always there, as you can see in the stickers, but it developed into different material for them. So we had this screenshot from the Urutau's presence in Rio class, and they reused it. So document the process was also important for us. And this final Colorboard was a result of that. Can you just pass? And I'll show just 2 examples of feelings that we addressed, such as love and frustration. The love part, I mean, came from bell hooks. It was a topic brought by them, by the Lunenburg students and also Rio students, but we worked by Lunenburg students. So really understanding how to do things together in solidarity, taking account of inequalities, the idea of collective love that that bell hooks talks about, and the other one that talks about frustration. So not everything works. So how to deal with technology, also dealing with frustration of not connecting, of broken internet in a pragmatic level, but also in the experience level. I mean, not being in presence. What difference does it make? And also, when I came to Lunenburg to teach with Christoph in person, it was like, whoa! Everyone must have had this experience of really seeing one person in person after COVID time. So it brought a lot of things to us. So we had classroom sessions and outdoor sessions inside the Lunenburg campus as well. So it really developed in very different territories, but also always trying to deal with these undoing methods and dealing with inequalities, frustration, and different time zones and language barriers as well, not only translation, but barriers around it.
All right, guys.
Maybe to just sum up, so what really happened across these kind of technological affordances is that we embraced the digital environment of the color board, of WhatsApp messaging, of being in touch across territories, while actually not denying that there are asymmetries and incoherencies and a lot of friction in these kind of technological infrastructures. And I think that was a very kind of imminent reflection that drew on historical and outside of the seminar material, on personal experiences that were all folded into it, but then put on a plane of exchanging these kind of things. And that was for us very, very interesting to see. And we want to actually continue on that by making a book on these kind of pedagogies that we were collaboratively developing with the students.
All right.
Thank you.
This is it. Thank you.
Yes.
And now I really understand the thing of
we can't
love
hear
and
you,
frustration.
Felix.
Sorry? Oh, you can't. That I really understand the this thing about love and frustration right now.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Felix.
You can't. They can't hear me on the other side. Marcelo, Hugo, eles não podem me ouvir.
His mic is out.
This mic is off.
Both ABCiber and Felix.
We're both off here.
Okay. Now, yeah.
So as I was saying, I really get this thing about love and frustration, because I really love your presentation, and I'm very frustrated because I feel that we could have gone all morning, or actually had a full day workshop on this really interesting way of thinking education and thought of alterity through your anti-pedagogical methods. I thought it was a really fantastic presentation. Our next speaker will be Yaniya Mikhalina. She's a PhD candidate and lecturer at the Trondheim Academy of Fine Art in Norway. She is a Tatar artist and researcher working with the notion of documentary and the ways reality is produced, represented, and distorted in psychic and political realms. She is engaged with spaces of sickness, convalescence, and fantasy, Islam feminism, and decolonial practices before, during, and after Russian coloniality, through filmmaking, listening, archiving, organizing, and other ethically considerate forms of artistic labor. In her presentation, Yaniya will reflect on art as a practice of resistance and share some of her insights on solidarity and refuge within colonial context as a mode of first-hand knowledge and sharing and consciousness raising. Yaniya.
Hello, everyone. Very nice being here, and extraterrestrial, actually. And unfortunately, for personal reasons, I couldn't make it to Santa Maria, but nevertheless, I'm in Brazil. And to map the trajectory and situate the context of that I encounter, and to capitulate in front of any claims to universality, I would like to start with an imaginary relational map of where I come from. It's Kazan, Tatarstan. Where I live is Trondheim, Norway, and where we speak from today is Santa Maria, Brazil. I wish there was a way to avoid centralization of statements, but papers need titles, and our psyches need linguistic and aesthetical borders to perceive the information. So as a starting point for today's conversation, I chose the title Preliminary Notes on Redirecting the Gaze. As an artist, and I work mainly with video, first and foremost, I treat the question of technology as a question of form that encapsulates certain temporalities, desired or unwanted, allow them to get actualized, unravel and affect us, or to be more precise, to offer new divisions in the psyches, divisions that question the existing capitalist, colonial, semantic and gender realities. I treat affect in economical Spinozian sense as an ability of a body to interact with another body. This ability to affect and to be affected and the concrete forms that affect takes is closely linked to the aesthetics and politics of the technology that participates in the artistic production. In my case, lens-based technologies and post-production software. That is to say, I do not take technological regimes and frameworks for granted as neutral infrastructures that simply belong to certain times, but rather propose to actively engage with them artistically, for every chosen technological context reveals and produces the nuanced realities of its practice or political impossibilities of these realities, just like every technological context we didn't choose. By choice here, I don't mean market-driven understanding of infinite commodity raw among which artist creator can freely choose. It is a decision that is based on necessity, on concrete situation in which we find ourselves, deeply connected to different life forms and standing in solidarity with them and with them in us. In this sense, and here I sense the feminist, I would polemicize with a famous statement of Audre Lorde that one cannot dismantle master's house with master tools, because if psychoanalysis has taught us anything, it would be that master tools don't belong to the master. The stakes are higher than ever, and art as technology of resistance can bring materialist understandings of technological unconscious that exceeds its designated contexts and times, for better and worse. I see the artist's role here neither to repress nor to fetishize or eroticize technology.
Yaniya, can you speak a bit slower, please? Because a lot of people here are not Anglophone, so if you could just slow down a bit, it'd be, I think, appreciated by the audience. Thank you.
Of course, sorry, I'm just stressed with this time limit. And yeah, okay, I continue that. Yeah, I stopped on the statement by Audre Lorde that I polemicize with, that one cannot dismantle the master's house with master tools, because master tools don't belong to the master. And the stakes are higher than ever, and art as a technology of resistance can bring materialist understandings of technological unconscious that exceeds its designated context and times, for better and worse. I see the artist's role here not to repress, neither to repress nor to fetishize or eroticize technology, but to address its surface materialistically and dynamically. For this presentation, I am attempting to reflect on art as a practice form for resistance and share some of the findings that I find productive in the current globalized context, in which the colonial agenda is not only seen from the perspective of the colonizer and the colonized, but it also extends to other colonial contexts, seeking solidarity and refuge. Apart from being a means of first-hand knowledge sharing and consciousness raising, the situation of blinded dissemination of suffering, violence, and rage on a planetary scale, produced by mediated colonialisms, expands coloniality as a schizophrenic condition of the global world. In this context, the role of the gaze, who, how, for whom, and where looks at, becomes paramount as it shapes the borders of modern subjectivity. Dietrichson has rightly pointed that one of the most famous images in the history of photography, the blue marble image, shows a close structural resemblance between cybernetic thinking that evolved around the same time as space travel and of schizophrenic thinking. I quote, "The image of a planet, just like a system, is something you watch from the outside, but at the same time you're also inside it. There is a strong analogy between system thinking and planet thinking. The position of whoever took the photo of the planet while looking at it from the outer space is like the voice you hear in your head when you are schizophrenic. You don't know where it's coming from. Of course, the voice that you hear is nothing but your own, yet your own thinking seems like a voice from afar, uttering commandments. That's exactly the situation with the concept of the visible planet." End of quote. Filmmaking has a lifelong relationship with the gaze already on the level of technology. The gaze of the camera, the gaze of the other, the gendered gaze, and the colonial gaze are participating in each other's world making, constantly blending and overlapping. Moving images allow us to touch the spaces and bring them together as they are, as well as something between them. For me, and I identify as a documentary filmmaker, it is important to support the knowledge about the illusionary character of any kind of representation, to work with the space between the gaze and the psyche which perceives it, so the viewers would see the materiality of it, its openness, its accidental but internally determined logics. While in the moment, an implicit assurance in the reality of a certain identity occurs, the figure of the other disappears. The urgency to treat the globalized context as a speech of the psychotic and take it serious as a document of a relationship of the subject to the discourse of the other, to the signifiers and to the borders of reality comes from semblance of experience of psychosis with an imperial world making, in terms of the loss and collapse of the time and space, which leads both to one's alienation from her own body and her own community. In psychosis, unlike in the case with neurotic who has no direct access to her unconscious, unconscious is lying on the surface. That is why listening to the subjects in psychotic state, we always work with a certain reading of a social field. This analogy doesn't come from the desire to pathologize the experience of psychosis. Rather, it acknowledges the spectrum of the ways complicated political context could affect psychopolitical reality and the perception of time and space and produce lines of alienation. It also allows us to abolish the idea of a human being as a whole and to cut the dichotomy between internal and external, a great myth of a combed modernity. Now, some practical embodiments of these thoughts. I want to speak about the two-channel video work I'm showing as a part of the exhibition, De Vires Technopoeticos, curated by Andrea Oliveira, Camila dos Santos, Fabiana Duarte, Mateus Moreno dos Santos Camargo, and Yaro Gask. Thank you very much. As a part of the symposiums that gathered us together. The work I'm presenting is called In the Volga-Ural Sky, and it draws on film representations of indigenous people of the Volga-Ural region, focusing on my native land of Tatarstan, an indigenous Muslim republic in central Russia, which has been colonized by the Moscow state in the 16th century. This work shows scenes from Soviet avant-garde fiction and documentary films that feature indigenous people is just exposed with VHS home videos of non-ethnic Russian communities that I gathered from people's personal archives. The montage is left for the gaze of the viewer, and the mediated representations from Soviet colonial lands, including world-famous Eisenstein Ivan the Terrible film, promote the idea of enforced equality or rather sameness between different indigenous people of diverse backgrounds, while the old new denominator of Soviet or Russian identity, practicing a very generalized version of Orientalism. This representation space offered by colonial avant-garde gaze functions as a tool for a pedagogy of subalternization, to borrow Sayak Valencia term, through which an identification with boundlessness of borders, whether these are borders of Russian Empire, of Soviet Union, or now Russian Federation, imposed from above, create underrepresentation on the subjective level and lead to atomization, repression, or compensation of the colonial experience inside and outside the subject. Even if you're not ethnic white Russian, being inside colonial borders of Russia leaves you no other choice from the outside. As a Muslim minority in non-Arabic and non-English speaking military imperial Christian state, one becomes invisible to the multiple set of geographies and constantly deals with generalization of various political contexts. At the same time, globalized context also
Yaniya,
acts
could you
as an...
close up, please?
Sorry?
Can you close up? Your time is up.
Okay. So I guess we'll end with this work. And how much do I have left?
Yeah, you don't have any. I gave you 3 minutes. I don't think you saw the 3 minutes. It's just that we need to move on if we're going to have our question period intact at the end of our presentations.
Mm-hmm. I just have 1 minute because
Okay.
I wanted to share two ways of working with a technological context, and this is my work with AI. Just a little bit here, and it's again, if one wants to work in and against certain technology, we have to deal with reality that it provides us, and here it's English-centric, it doesn't know anything about Volga Tatar, so here I chose the strategy of using the existing imagery as a residue of reality that cannot be made up through technologically mediated colonial fantasies. And yes, I find it's important to continue working with it, even though it belongs to a colonial context, because we just simply cannot afford it. And at the end, I guess I would skip a lot of things, but round up with a practice that I call the practice of cosmopolitical gaze. And it would stand as an opposition to the constructed, imperial, schizophrenic, alienated and alienating world-making by its nature. The cosmopolitical here is a dynamic category. It constantly shimmers and expands in pieces, flowing from the river to the sea. It absorbs struggles other than its own and learns from it and supports it because it's open, transparent, hospitable and militant. It is not afraid of master tools. It doesn't hold to the past, which blocks the future, it has never been. Neither it holds to the future, which is simply redesigned. It is a situated understanding of borders, technology, and borders of technology. And even if it is elusive, it is yet very concrete. For every offset colonial gaze has a beginning, but has no end until we imagine one. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Yaniya. Sorry to cut you off and appearing impolite, but I just want to respect the time frames here. Our next speaker is the heralded René Alicia Smith. She's a great friend of UFSM. UFSM has these great internationalization initiatives, and one of them is a partnership with René and Andrea, who's organizing this meeting. So, René is the head of the Wit School of Arts at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. She is the immediate past president of South African Humanities Deans Association and was executive dean of the Faculty of Arts and Design at Durban University of Technology, where she was founder director of DigiFest and was one of the co-hosts of the very successful IZEA 2018 in Durban. Her presentation is titled Arts and Epistemic Justice, and it will reflect on the South African context, affordances and limitations with respect to access, cultural and linguistic diversity. Dr. Smith? Here, okay, let me give you this mic here.
We're just trying to find. Okay, we're just trying to make sure that the presentation shows. That's my focus. Good, thank you. I emailed it to you. Can you show it? It's not that one. Do you want me to open here? Okay, you can try. Let me close all of these. Oh. I won't shade. I think he has to shade. I'm so sorry. I made the fatal mistake of bringing a Mac without a connection, and it's caused all kinds of hiccups. Yeah. I wish she had continued speaking now. Are you winning? Ah, somebody who knows. So, should we share screen?
Share screen. You okay for live? Huh? This is here. Google share screen. Okay. You speaking next. You.
Yes, I'm ready to go, but I can't.
Yes. Yes.
I think I should just.
PDF. Depois eu vou abrir a versão PDF.
Okay. Hello. I think I'm going to start without the presentation because I'm getting as restless as you are. I think, yeah? Is it showing? I think they need the... Aha. Yay! Hurrah, hurrah. Okay, I think we're winning. So, how will I move it? Because you're controlling. Should I come there? Okay, when I do this, it's next one, next one. So when I do this, you change. Sweet. Okay, good morning everybody, and I'm so sorry for the delay. It is completely my mistake because if you walk around with this device, you should always plan for challenges. There are also a number of settings that are blocking me sharing it from my side. So I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I want to thank you for being present and staying. I loved the previous presentations. I think they talk to part of what I want to share today. My topic is arts and epistemic justice and injustice. I focus on the South African context, and in so doing, I try to suggest that in this incredibly unequal country that is mine, that in response to the provocation that was posed yesterday, in fact, the change is at the point of the community and the locals. So I'll talk about our context, about epistemic injustice, about the ethics of AI, and some of our local responses. I'm on the third one now. Okay, so I'll tell you a bit about my country. It's a country of 60 million people. 43 million people have access to the internet. It is largely at 68% of the country is now urban. But I'm so sorry you're not seeing the image that I want to show you because it really reflects that South Africa is the most unequal society on earth. Indeed, it is the tragedy of our lifetime. We have surpassed Brazil, I think 2019. The image on the front of the May 2019 Time magazine, if you want to Google, you can find it, is a true reflection of the state of the country and its inequality. We have 32.6% unemployment. The top 0.1% own 25% of the wealth in my country. The gap in test scores between the top 20% of schools and over 80%, and the top 20% of schools and the remaining 80% of schools is wider than any country on this planet. But we are seeing an increase in smartphone ownership from 56% in 2018 to 71% in 2022. The next slide, that's us. The internet access gap between urban and rural areas is sitting at 23%. This is just a picture of my country. Now, what I want to talk about is, notwithstanding all the statistics that I shared with you, we are also a country of linguistic and cultural diversity. South Africa has 12 official languages, and this is important in a context of monolingualism. We are a culturally diverse country with almost as many ethnic groups, and we still have apartheid racial classifications in operation. Africa alone has around 3,000 ethnic groups and around 200 different languages. Now, within this context, of late, we are repeatedly told of the affordances of technology and how we can change our lives. Just yesterday, one of our leading AI experts in the country, Professor Chilidze Marwala, reminded us that South Africa, with its rich tapestry of culture and diversity, can harness AI's power to be better in society, to better its society, economy, and future. But here's the thing. our inequities and our inequalities mean that we have to come up with different solutions. That social justice demands that we ensure the advancement occurs across the board without abandoning our citizens. So my argument for today is that linguistic and cultural diversity are a defining characteristic of many of our countries and nations, and yet the models and data that are fed into machines do not reflect this. In essence, they exclude, they misrepresent, they silence, and they devalue. And for me, this is epistemic injustice. And so I've been quite deliberate in today's presentation to reflect on and to use the works of scholars from the Global South, in particular from my country. Emma Rathkamp-Bloom is someone who's done extensive research for years on AI and ethics, and she argues consistently that the exclusion of African academics and AI practitioners that are from our continent is a form of epistemic injustice. It may be contributing to the general harm in terms of fairness and bias concerns, as this exclusion is a product of deeper structural injustices in the West and globally. We will find that other scholars reiterate this when they refer to algorithmic colonialism. And what we are calling for, I think increasingly, is better representation. That data, values, and humans who build and deploy AI should include representation from people from our backgrounds. We also argue that the focus on diversification will ensure better AI outcomes. And this is voices from the diaspora who are arguing this. But of course, probably more well known to many of you are Joy Bualamwini and Gebru, who argue consistently the substantial disparities in the accuracy of classifying darker females from lighter females, darker males from lighter males in gender classification system requires attention. And so the appeal, as I share with you today, is that research and development in languages and in the humanities across the board and the domains of language technologies are essential. And I'm making this call within the context of what was shared yesterday. We need more culturally diverse and inclusive as well as ethical digital language resources and software. And we need data sets that are diverse and AI which has negligible error rates, and ultimately AI that's applied fairly and not sold to authorities without our consent. Now this is important because just yesterday I made a joke about the translation from Portuguese to English. Some of it was astounding. It was so funny, I was giggling while I was reading it. But in fact, it is deeply problematic and deeply troubling because it suggests to us that we have not put in enough R&D, and it needs to come from us. AI should not be weaponized to harass us. And so I'm now going to turn to the issue of the local and reflect on some of the experiences that I have in my own country. Because I want to argue that in response to the provocation posed to us yesterday by Yukoi, in fact, some of the answers are the small things that we are doing on a local level. The South African Centre for Digital Language Resources has been working tirelessly to make sure that all 12 of our languages are available so that we have data sets where we don't laugh when we are seeing a translation happening. This is powerful work. This is how it begins. Here they support the management and distribution of language resources. If you're interested, just Google Sadula. The next example I want to use is a digital festival which I co-founded in 2013, and which is part of the reason I got to meet Professor Andrea Oliveira and the team at LabInter. It was small, and we were very clear that within our context, which I shared with you earlier, where we have serious issues around access to devices, let alone access to the internet, it was important to partner with someone else from the Global South who understood our context when we are talking about media art and electronic art. And I want to say quite proudly that after year 5, we were able to co-host ICEA 2018. I'm going to skip over that slide, except to say that where I am now, there are 2 really important interventions at a local level. The one is the Fakugezi Festival, which is turned 10 years this year. It's a creative festival, digital innovators from across the continent. I share this because oftentimes we don't know the incredible work that's happening outside from where we are. Oh yes, long gone. And the work of Fakugezi is incredibly important in giving a voice to creatives and digital creators and innovators on the rest of the African continent. The second example I want to share with you within the context of our country's review of creative outputs and innovations is the work of our creative research journal, Ellipsis. Lastly, I want to talk about our ZOA departments, digital arts and film and television, all of whom are located in an urban area in one of the top universities in the country. But I want to end, because I know my time is up, just to return to the beginning. You can go to the second last slide, to return to the beginning. So yesterday's keynote posed some really important questions to us, and they provided a necessary provocation for my own presentation. How will we produce alternatives, right? How will we produce alternatives to forms of disruption? How will our universities produce talents able to challenge these problems? And the answer is the local. It's the subaltern, it's the communities that actually have our answers and that must speak. We need investment in our universities. We need investment in indigenous knowledge systems. And I say this within a context where I don't know about yours, but in my country, there is a rollback of public funding to universities. There's a rollback of public funding to the humanities across the globe. It's the humanities, it's the languages, it's the arts that often are the departments that are closed. And yet the answers to the provocations posed yesterday are going to come from us. It is a reminder that the small local efforts really do cause the butterfly effect. And I imagine my world, which looks very different from the world of the data sets that we rely on. My world is a world where Zanele Moholi's exquisite work becomes what we should be about. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, René. That was a really fascinating talk. Sort of dovetails with what Yukui was talking about, the different AI models that we have. But I think that that what you were mentioning about the data sets that go in to inform these large language models are really being tailored to focus on a particular set of language and cultural interests, which are not always the ones that we think are there. Anyhow, I don't know if you are there any questions from the hall? Tem alguma pergunta? There's one question from the internet. My good friend, let's see, David Maring, who's saying, would it be possible for the web to resolve our mythological lack in countries such as Brazil or Africa? The mythological reference is absent in relation to our references of traditional emitters or broadcasters in the north. So I guess it's all about a question of mythology. Possibly you're probably the best person to address this question right now, because I think the question of mythology is very, very important within South African thought.
Yeah, I actually really want to thank Yukoi's presentation, because I thought about it last night and I thought about it this morning, and I thought about across the world, where do we have spaces where our communities are heard? And this is community media. whether it's community radio or community television, and often these fora are seen as old technologies, but in fact they are incredibly powerful. I can't talk for Brazil, but I can certainly talk for my own country and the continent. Radio remains the most powerful media. And so one way in which you can respond to what is happening is actually to begin to hear other voices. The more voices we have, the more people who really don't look like the people who are putting in the data, right? The more of the diversity and inclusion we have, I think a better world we will have. It's just my personal opinion.
Yaniya, do you want to address the question about mythology? Because it's an important part of colonialism, and the Russians have such a strong mythological existence, and that that lives through them. What are your impressions on that?
I think that Christoph actually raised his hand to answer, but maybe just briefly to say, I find education is a very important part of this discussion in terms of also AI and presence of information on the internet, and how can we work with it, and what we can do is, it's mythology is not just simply streamed, it's not a set of information, it's a knowledge which is an embodied knowledge. So that's the question which is ahead of us. How can we mediate this knowledge, through the use of the new technologies? And it's a question of language, as been said by René, I think, and the question of resources. So it's not something that can be responded, from all the contexts. I mean, from the context where I come from, it's I see only the answer in kind of addressing very, very precisely the technological and linguistic, and political hierarchies which are present around, and which is, as I said, covers kind of multiple contexts, because Tatarstan is a Muslim place, but it's is being excluded from the Muslim geographies, because it's not, it was considered to be the northernmost Muslim state, but somehow, because it's inside Russia, it completely escapes it, and this is just one, perspective. I don't know what else to say.
Thank you, Yaniya. I have actually a question for Christoph and Flavia. A lot of what we heard this morning in your presentation concerns the idea of care. I mean, it has very deep philosophical tradition, and I was wondering, to what extent can empathy be cultivated through digital arts education, especially online, through online interactions, fostering a deep understanding of diverse experiences and perspectives across cultures?
I can start. Thanks for the question, and thank you also, Yaniya and René, for these beautiful presentations. I think we could go on forever. But I think the question that Yaniya actually raised is affect, and I think affect is somewhat something we didn't address as a concept in our in this specific context, but is an important, very important part of our work, especially in relation also to media, and the question of how to relay at a distance and how to affect at a distance. And one of the things that is always conceptualized with digital media, or often, is that it's disembodied, detached from the kind of localities that these kind of platforms somewhat extract, but don't facilitate necessarily. And I think that's something we wanted to contest a lot in our work, because there is all kinds of sensuous embodied relays happening through these kind of media technologies that create affects. But also, and this is maybe Flavia wants to take up that kind of point, we mentioned frustration. So frustration was also part of that, where we tried to create a caring environment, but we couldn't in the way that we would have done if we had been all in one space, the Brazilians and the people in Lüneburg, and that created often a kind of discomfort, especially around the asymmetries of technical fidelity. So in Lüneburg having very high-speed internet, and in Brazil not. And but we didn't want to go into a solutionist response to that. And I think that's also caring for the process as it unfolds, rather than thinking you have to kind of write solutions, or you just have to tweak the things to get your needs met by the technology. Flavia.
Yes, just to sum up, before that, thank you, Annika, and also René, very inspiring talks. And I think you brought some very important questions, not only on affect, but on coloniality, ongoing coloniality, and how can we address that, and also bringing up communities. One of our first questions in our workshop was how to build community across territories and across transatlantic gatherings. So this was, I think it's our concern to look at these local responses, as René puts it, in terms of, in our case, in a teaching environment, but considering these inequalities. And to address the topic of care, understanding it in various layers. I remember when we had, I will give just examples, not just to be fast. We had a lot of preparation for this workshop, and one of our concerns was with infrastructure, technical infrastructure. For example, how can we make some hybrid classes inside the territory of Aldeia Maracanã, which is an occupation, so they don't have energy there. So this was a very important topic, and we tried to address this by, can we have some fundings for putting internet in Aldeia? Can we address that in the technical level so we can have more structure? And we were not able to have it for several reasons that would be very interesting to address here, but exceed our time. But it's important to say that, okay, we have to deal with what we have. Then let's address time, and let's take into account very deeply the time we need for translation, for language attunement, for not only care, but the time that care requires. So a lot of, I have a long-term collaboration with indigenous people here in Rio. And one thing I learned that it takes time, and it takes Kairos time as well to find solutions and creative solutions to address that inequality, not surpass it, understanding, it's just a technological problem. No, it's a colonial problem, it's a technological problem, it's an infrastructure problem, it's an ecological problem, it's an extractivism problem. And how can we address that different layers at the same time in a teaching environment, dealing with bringing communities, addressing colonialism and healing in the way of taking care of everyone's time and trying to be attentive not to leave anyone behind.
Questions from the audience here? If not, there's a question I'd like to... Oh, sorry, Andrea? Or Yara? You're going to take away my microphone?
Eu queria saber só, rapidamente, bom cumprimentar a mesa de vocês, para Flavia, René, Christoph, Yaniya. E a pergunta era se a Yaniya tinha falado sobre usar a inteligência artificial. Eu queria saber um pouquinho mais.
So, I mean, I think that's part of what I was trying to say, Yaniya, is that there's a push. In fact, one of our main universities, their entire strategy is around AI. There's a push in universities at school level for us to really start using machine learning to its full advantages. And the language often is around the affordances of it. So definitely it's been used across the country. And part of the reason I chose Professor Marala is he has been leading the charge that this is the future and we must all get on board. And it's interesting to see now how he's saying, yes, it's the future, but let's start being cautious, a little cautious, let's pay attention. So I hope it answers you, but I want to reflect on a project we did with LabInter. Very experimental. It was on neural networks. It was really around how do we reflect on COVID-19 and our experiences. And it was a really important project for me because it was one small thing there that really triggered my thinking. And it's really important for students. I've taught at a university which was only practice-based, and I've taught at a university where it's about critical thinking. And this is the difference. We want artists, we want creatives to go out and to be critical in their thinking. So we participated in this wonderful project, and it relied on open source software, which effectively has its limitations, we soon learned, in terms of the English to Portuguese translation. But as I was sharing my views, the machine misread my emotions. So it said, because as you can see, I speak loudly, I use my hands, the machine said I was angry. I think this is really powerful. It's the first time I stopped to think, oh, this is interesting, because what we put in is what we're going to get out. So when you are creating digital art, when you are creating art that is dependent on what is available, and if that is distorted, the end result is distorted. So it was a project to the point around our working across countries with Global South, sharing experiences. It had a profound effect on me, a small project to make me realize that there is a lot of work to be done around what we put into the system. It becomes important. What is freely available becomes important. Go onto Flickr. You are likely, sorry to have used that name, you're likely not to find many images that look like me, right? So imagine designing something that uses all of those as a reflection of women, what that means for someone like me. So I think this is what we want, actually. We're in a university. We want young people to engage critically with AI and what it means for us, with machine learning across the board things. I hope I answered you, Yara.
Yes, what about it? Oh, Yaniya, could you address the question about AI and in your work? Yaniya?
I'm sorry, what is the question? I just, another question than Christoph has asked. I just wrote in our chat, I don't know if it's seen, but I have a small child and it's not very well right now, so it's...
okay, yes.
Yeah.
We had a conversation.
Space in which I am now. Yeah, I'm sorry.
We had a conversation about this thing yesterday. Actually, it was with Yara about running a parallel conversation to the presentation. Well, not a parallel presentation, but a parallel conversation on the chat, and that chat is going on over there. I always found that super funny and super interesting. But Yaniya, yes, the question we wanted to address right now was about AI and how it's being co-opted, I guess, and by the kind of information that is being controlled and how it's being controlled. I was wondering what that's been in your experience.
Okay, now it's a little bit calmer. I mean, I just started actually to work with AI, as I said, so it's just my kind of first introduction and engagement with it. But what I discovered immediately, that Tatar is not present, at all as a signifier in the context of programming that I'm using. At least maybe there are others. And then there's another thing, the severe censorship. Almost everything that's connected to Islam, when you try to work with veils, with some, parts of the costume, it's racialized first, and second, it doesn't allow you to go. So it says, you're violating the rules of the community. So it takes, really, 3 hours just to reach a very simple thing, because everything I try to do is banned per se, by the fact of its existence. And it really resembles me a situation how when there is this Russian engine system called Yandex, and then when there was this war atrocities happening in Bucha, which is a Ukrainian city which was completely destroyed, and there been a lot of violence performed over the local population. And then when one would Google Bucha in Yandex in this Russian engine, you would see that just flourishing neighborhood. And it's the same now that I experience, typing Gaza, and in the AI, that it just refuses to show you, the current state of the city. And actually, that's how I started to work. I've been inspired a lot by Palestinian artists working with AI in the current context, because it's not. I've been reading how people wouldn't, when you would write like sad Palestinian children, angry Palestinian children, it would block a certain affect, to appear. So the only thing that you could actually get the image from is a happy Palestinian children. But then, of course, you would see this, children which never existed. So it creates very like this unheimliche, feeling about the future that is never there and it's never been, without. So this is how I started to develop my own methodology with, working with real imagery, with the archival images, but kind of trying to, enter into the dialogue, and also acknowledging that this dialogue won't be satisfactory, as Flavia and Christoph have been talking about, that all that we can do in this, fascist context in which, we live in, we can only address these inequalities, and we can address them in different forms and in different ways, from educational situations, from, any kind of mediations that our knowledges and exchanges goes through. So that's kind of the only, and make it visible, to other people who might not share the context that we come from. Because of course it's not, possible to everyone to learn Tatar. I mean, kind of any kind of positive knowledge framework, it's not, it's not feasible. But what we can do is, to kind of, as I said, that it's not about just plurality, it's not just about having, different kind of technologies on the plate, but it's try to situate them in a very specific situation that we find ourselves in. And, that's where, this ethics and aesthetics kind of meet together. Also, I would not even, use the word aesthetics. I really like Walter Mignol and Rolando Vasquez when they proposed to use aesthesis instead, kind of to bridge, to build another heritage line, and also to think of, modernity not just as like modernity, but modernity / decoloniality as a one concept, concept which is, which already includes this inequality and recognition that modernity is being based, on, coloniality.
Okay, I wanted to close up with one last question for the four of you, and which addresses, I guess, the topic of our conversation, and it would be how can digital technologies be leveraged in arts education to amplify marginalized voices, resist digital colonialism, and promote a more inclusive representation of cultural narratives? What specific strategies have you guys incorporated in your works? You want to start, Christoph?
Okay, I'll be super short. I think it makes a lot of sense in that respect to look at techno-feminist work, for instance, that has been very, very strong over the last 30 years, actually, or even before, but at least since the conception of the internet, to find alternative ways of reprogramming and reorienting, reoperationalizing, actually at the root level of these digital technologies. So, and if I think hybrid is a really worn term, but I think a lot of the successful strategies actually embrace the connective power of corporate platforms as much as they try to kind of promote other kinds of ways of affecting through these platforms. So creating different kinds of aesthetics. I'm okay with that term. But also how to kind of build alternative forms and ways of not feeding the same kind of extractive logics that underline these corporate digital media platforms. And I think René was pointing that out. I think Yaniya was just critically pointing that out too. And I think that's, so there's a kind of a multi-layered approach that is not like hailing one thing while rejecting the other, but I think it's more about how to inflect these kind of things with a kind of difference, and artists do that a lot. They kind of create irritation rather than compliance. And I think that's kind of, that's a great way to do it.
So we'll do Flavia, then Yaniya, and we'll close it off with René, if she still has any.
I will be super short also, just to mention that, yeah, programming is really, really important to address banned and prohibited material, because we know that the ethics that corporations have are colonial, are destructive forces. I would love to have here yesterday's provocation, René, because I was not there, but I was, you know, trying to imagine what you bring as a response, as this idea of fighting, of hacking the system still, of keep doing it until the community have the right to fully access it, and think of extractivism, of course, not cultural extractivism, and what these technologies do our planet, and who has access to it, and how can we engage otherwise to locally address and act on it.
Yaniya?
And very brief, I have a problem with the aesthetic.
We can always substitute it for affect.
I just think Mignolo wasn't precise enough, that's all.
I would love to engage in this conversation further, but that's why we're also here, you know, to continue. But also briefly to say that I think I identify a lot with the outsider position in perspective to different technological regimes and aesthetical regimes, and kind of my strategy is I borrowed actually from the concept called overwriting. It's from Freud, where he speaks about that, you know, human memory as a mystic writing pad, you know, this where, you know, one layer, there is always a residue, you know, even though you can erase something, but then there is something that's staying. So I just find it productive in terms of, you know, kind of addressing technology in this way, and, you know, thinking always not about, you know, artistic work and film work, not as an editing or re-editing, but rather, and changing the meaning or creating something new, but rather, again, to kind of allow these layers to meet and to exist all together. And this is what also, I mean, you can call it irritation, you can call it feminist killjoy. I mean, there are many kind of, you know, ways of dealing with it, and, you know, we can only allow them to coexist. That's kind of very banal, I guess, but yet very important performative gesture. I think that has to be remade again and again.
Okay, thanks so much. And I know Andrea wanted to say something. I know we're out of time, but I really want to agree with everything that's been said. I want to share how when I started a festival, because I really do believe in the affordances of technology, by the way, people were trying to caution me and I wasn't listening to them. And I remember artists painting a QR code as a form of resistance against my festival. I remember somebody putting up an exhibition called Low Tech as a form of resistance. I think that's important. So I think critical thinking, I cannot overstate it. We really have to always be thinking about what we are producing and its contribution. And I'm really proud to say that I think these international collaborations are really key. Two of the colleagues, two students, both graduate students, their work is here. Luyanda's work is here because of the collaboration, right? So he's got an exhibition on. Shmira's work is here, and her work really is techno-feminist. So I just want to say there is real possibilities when we turn to communities, when we go local, and when we allow for alternative voices and people to challenge us.
Andrea?
Eu gostaria de agradecer muitíssimo a presença de todos e a fala muito instigante da Flavia, do Christoph, da Yaniya e da René. E eu vou fazer a última pergunta. Eu queria, se vocês pudessem comentar um pouquinho mais essa relação universidade-comunidade, porque eu vejo que vários projetos passam por aí. Aqui no Brasil, a gente sabe que nós temos uma reforma nos currículos, onde a gente tem que ter uma carga curricular bem mais alta de extensão. E essa importância que, aqui no Brasil, o Ministério da Educação está entendendo que a gente precisa mudar essa relação universidade-comunidade, porque a universidade sempre fez trabalhos com comunidades, mas a gente sabe que, historicamente, o conhecimento ficava dentro da universidade em geral. E, então, se vocês podiam falar um pouquinho mais dessa relação e como essas práticas, né, que acontecem dentro da universidade, com esse pensamento crítico, como a professora René falou, podem estar realmente impactando, sendo propositivas e envolvendo realmente a comunidade a partir das suas demandas também.
So yeah, the question from Andrea was about the relation between the community and the university and the practices that can be changed within the university to accommodate demands by buy-in from the community. Would you like to address that, René?
Sure. I think Flavia and Christoph might have some really great feedback to share with us. What I have found is that, well, firstly, I think it is important, but I think we have to look at the ethics of our practices always. We are in the business of extracting and taking from communities and using it for our own research and to improve our own lives and and so I think we have to have very clear guidelines of how we engage with our communities, how we deal with what we call indigenous knowledge systems becomes incredibly important. So many of ours have been sold and sent away. So I think that's important. But on another level, I think in our universities, when we are dealing with artists and communities, we have to pay people, right? And normally in our universities, I don't know about yours, but in mine, it is sometimes impossible to make sure that you arrive with money to pay for someone's transport. You arrive with money to pay for all of the inconveniences because of our internal procurement systems. So I think it's a very big question for me because it's one that I grapple with all the time. I talk about an open entrepreneurial university, but I know we have a long way to go before we really are the innovative universities we are. In fact, I gave a talk as part of our entrepreneurship development in higher education conferences to say that when we do this kind of work, our universities have to see the risks that are involved and support it. They mustn't see a risk and go, no, 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 no. This is not what knowledge is about. Yesterday's provocation was about alternative knowledges. It requires us to work differently. We can't work in the same system. Apropos Audre Lorde's comment, you cannot. You have to create different systems in your procurement system to make it possible to work with communities. You have to create different systems to make sure that you don't extract from communities. So that would be my sense, but I'm sure our colleagues have a much better answer.
You want to pick that can, Flavia?
Yes, I completely resonate with you, René. I think this is our ethics fail when we touch academic bureaucracy and legislations and personal. So these three things have to go together. The baby. So having indigenous and Afro-descendant and Afro-diasporic people inside academic team, decision-making, being led by communities and personal, changing legislation. Really, payment is a very, very big problem for persons who are not from the university. So this is a very important barrier that we have to deal with it. I remember one Fred Moten's quote is that it says more or less like, we bring communities to universities, but the university cannot deal with what community brings. Yes, we have to take risks. We have to change legislations. We have to address budget, equal also status quo, you know, to talk about co-authorship, not extracting from indigenous people and Afro-diasporic. I mean, extension projects have been in universities since the beginning, and they are prolific, but they don't receive money, and they don't have the research status. So, yeah, legislation, very pragmatic things, having persons there, and also keeping opening ways for them to stay there and to be paid fairly and to be paid equally.
Just since we're already down with Fred Moten, I think one of the things that they suggest is, him and Stefano Harni, is finding ways of how to steal from the university too, right? So I think that's the kind of love-hate relationship that you have to the institution, because the institution is not going to change from its kind of extractive logic that is really at the bottom line of its economy. So in this kind of neoliberal state of our time, I don't see so much potential of the university to change this kind of mode, other than always seeking out the cracks for the time being. And I think there is a lot of desire actually amongst students that live in the niches, that live in the undercommons of the universities, that want to do stuff, and that they are part of communities. And that I think it's our task also to kind of hold spaces open for that too, inside of the institution, in a kind of para-institutional way. That's my pragmatic response to that.
Yaniya, it's great to see your son, and that he's recovered. But it's great. Look, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut off the talk now because the coffee is here, and I think that people want to get to the coffee break before the beginning of the next session. So I'd like to thank you guys, but I'm going to pass the mic to Thais, and she will close this session. Fantastic. It was a very, very, very good and rewarding presentation. Thais?
Passaremos agora a palavra para a professora doutora Andréia Machado Oliveira, vice-diretora do Centro de Artes e Letras, e para a professora doutora Liliane Dutra Brignol, coordenadora do Programa de Pós-Graduação em Comunicação da UFSM, que entregarão uma lembrança à professora doutora René Smith e ao professor doutor Felix Rebolledo Palazuelos.
É só agradecer, é uma lembrancinha. Flavia, Christoph e Yaniya vai pelo WhatsApp e entrega pessoalmente agora, então, para René e Felix. É um agradecimento. Muito obrigada, uma mesa excelente, inspiradora.